Hi guys, my name's Emma McLean. I'm a positive reinforcement coach at Horse Charming, and I've put together a little video for you. It's supposed to be fun, no judgment about any sort of where you're at in terms of your transition to positive reinforcement or where you've come from. And there's no kind of wrong or right to this. This is just my experience, and I just thought it might be fun to kind of put together 10 things that I've learned since transitioning or in the process of transitioning to force-free horse training. So hopefully you'll get some identification with some, if not all of them. So the first thing is it's okay to have a scruffy horse. That's a big one for me, because I was one of these people that was grooming their horse every day, would take great pride in how he looked, wanted other people to think that I was a good horse owner, so, you know, my horse was clean, etc., etc. And what I've come to kind of accept is, firstly, because at Horse Charming we promote giving animals consent, and we want them to have a voice to basically say whether they do or don't want to be touched or groomed. So I had to get very disciplined actually about not touching my horse and not grooming my horse unsolicited. And in that process, I've kind of come to realise that horses don't care what they look like. And, you know, there's lots of benefits to actually having a dirty horse. You know, the mud coverage is really good insulation, and it helps their coat to kind of deal with the elements. So, yeah, that's just, you know, one kind of thing that I've sort of learned along the way, really. I used to groom him every day, and now he's lucky if he gets a groom, you know, from 1 month to the next. He might not be groomed, but I do lots of scratching sessions with him, and a bit of mud might fall off, but you know, it's a byproduct really, I guess, of me trying to make him feel good through the scratching session. So that's number one. It's okay to have a dirty horse. Number two is friendships and the conversations that you have with your friends may change when you start using positive reinforcement with your horses, but it's okay, because you do get new friends and new conversations, and I'm very glad to be part of a force-free community where I've got lots of people who I've actually never met, but I do really consider to be friends now, because I've spent so much time chatting to them online and stuff, so that's nice. But a few little kind of things that I've learned about how friendships might change or evolve is, you know, force-free training amongst horsey friends. It's a bit like if you've got a friend who's just found God and they want to tell you all about their kind of new discovery. People don't really want to hear it, and if they're being nice, you know, they might hear you out for a little while, but ultimately they want to carry on doing what they're doing with their animal, and that's okay. That's up to them. You know, nobody wants to have anything rammed down their throat. So what I've found is just to have some stock phrases up my sleeve, just to get people thinking, really, without saying a lot, because you can say a lot without saying much. So the ones that I like is, or the ones that I like are when people are telling me about problems that they have with their horse and why positive reinforcement wouldn't work to solve that. I tend to just say things like, all animals learn in the same way, even you, and just kind of leave it hanging in the air. And also people can get a bit like, oh, she just called me an animal, that's weird. But it just kind of gets people thinking about whether they could be doing stuff differently, I suppose, to achieve what it is that they want with their horse. Another one is when it's quite common for people to say, he does it for no reason, or he did this for no reason. And how I tend to respond to that is to say, he does have a reason, we just haven't figured it out yet. So they're the things that I've found are kind of helpful. Another thing is, you know, learning to speak up for your horse and be an advocate for your horse with other people. It doesn't have to be friends, could be friends if you're on livery and stuff like that, but you know, more like vets, farriers, people like that, people who are professional people who are dealing with your horse on your behalf for some reason. It's okay for you to be your horse's voice and to say, please stop, he doesn't like that, or please stop, you're frightening him, or whatever, you know, and it's okay to set boundaries, because you're the only person that can do that for him, really, without, you know, him having to kind of act out, you know. So it's better for you to kind of speak up before situations escalate. And I had to learn that the hard way, actually. I've put that in there because I did have an experience like that earlier on in the year, where I had a locum vet come out to deal with Flynn, and it was kind of on the hop, and I didn't really explain that he's trained force free. She was trying to use force with him, and it just went horribly, you know, the whole situation was just really horrible. So the next time what I did was I booked an appointment. I emailed my vet in advance. I said, this is what he's trained in, this is what he can do, this is what he can't do, this is what I would be happy with you doing. And it actually just went so well. So that would be my advice, really, if you are transitioning and you want to let other professionals know how to handle your horse. You know, just get it up front, and just be honest and say, you know, these are the limitations that I want you to work under, and it'll just go so much better for you and your horse, and for the person as well. So number 3 is you can be an effective positive reinforcement trainer in 2 minutes or less. So what I mean by that is, when I was using aversive training, I might train my horse for a minimum of 30 minutes at a time. And, you know, we might achieve something in that time, but largely we'd be going over old ground and sort of practicing what we already knew. At the time, I had no concept of the emotional fallout of aversive training, so, you know, it just wasn't an issue, really. But in 2 minutes or less, we can achieve really amazing things. You know, as an example, today his training for movement has kind of gone up a notch in terms of what he is willing to do with me, and that happened in a very short session. So you really don't need to be spending lots of time training your horse in order to make real progression with positive reinforcement. So you're actually, people often say, oh, I haven't got time for this, or I haven't got time for that, but actually we kind of always found the time to ride, didn't we? So, you know, we've got the time, 2 minutes or less, to do a bit of positive reinforcement with our horses. And, you know, then the rest of the time you've got to do other cool stuff with him or just hang out. So that kind of leads me on to number 4, actually, which is your horse appreciates you being present without you doing anything. So what I mean by this is, in order to change your horse's perception about you and what you represent, spending a lot of time where you're just with him and you're not actually asking him to do anything, or be anything, he will really value that and appreciate it, and that will help your training overall, because it will alter his perception about what you are and what you bring to the table. And that was a big learning curve for me as well, you know, just spending that time existing with him in the same space, and just kind of observing, really. And I learned a lot from just doing that, so I'd really recommend that to anyone who is transitioning or otherwise. That leads me on to number 5. And number 5 is, the faster you go, the behinder you get, or the tortoise, not the hare approach. And what we mean by this is, if you try and rush this stuff before the horse is ready, ultimately things will go wrong, and you'll end up with an unhappy horse, basically. And I certainly was guilty of that in the beginning. I was quite a, you know, busy, doing quite person, and I wanted, really, if I'm honest, I probably wanted to get to a point where I could use positive reinforcement for riding. So I was probably rushing things, And it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And until I accepted that Flynn was going to dictate the pace of our training and what he was comfortable doing, I was just going backwards, really. You know, he was getting more and more frustrated with me, and I was getting more and more frustrated with the process. And, you know, I nearly chucked the towel in lots of times in the first 6 months. But when I could actually just take a step back and go, okay, it's not about me, it's all on his terms now, then we really started to see some changes. And I'll come on to that a little bit more later on. So number 6 is the one thing you have to change to make this work is you. So what I mean by that is positive reinforcement. It becomes a way of life, really, and it actually starts to change you as a person. And when you're really into it, you kind of start to see that you're doing it, or you're thinking about it in your relationships, in your parenting, at work, you know, and it just goes so much further than just your horse or just your animals. And I often find myself asking myself, what's this person's motivation? What's reinforcing this behaviour for this person? So yeah, you know, and whilst you will see lots and lots of change in your horse, the biggest change I think you'll see is in yourself. That's been my experience anyway. Number 7 is it's simple, but it's not easy. So what I mean by that is we all need help, particularly in the beginning, to get the foundations right, which is why we recommend coaching. It's probably easy for people to go, oh, yeah, of course you're going to recommend coaching because you are coaching people. But actually, if you cared to look back through the horse charming pages, you would see that when I was a horse charming student, I was going, get coaching, it's amazing, it's so helpful, you've all got to do it, it's just brilliant. And that's because it's just so helpful. You know, I don't think you would be able to achieve, you might be able to get the behaviour, but I don't think you would be able to, as a completely novice person, I don't think you would be able to teach yourself this stuff and get the right emotional underpinning for your training. That's just my view. So I would say video everything you do. Don't just video one session because you want somebody else to see it. Video everything. Analyse your own videos. And be constantly looking, you know, to better your own training. And also, it desensitises you to the camera. I was so crippled with nerves being on camera, and I'm not a nervous person normally, but for some reason, me filming myself training a horse, it was just like, oh, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And until I started filming everything, and it was completely benign. I wasn't sending videos necessarily to anyone, they were just all being stored on YouTube. Then I just got this new confidence with it, and now, you know, it really isn't a big deal at all. And another, you know, really beneficial thing to filming everything is that if you do have a really good or a really dodgy session, you can then show it to someone and go, what's going on here? Or look at this, isn't this amazing? And I had that experience myself recently where after, you know, a couple of years of really good training with Flynn, I opened the menage, I went and stood, waited for him, he meandered out in his usual way, and then all of a sudden he just like leapt into the air and ran towards me and reared up and spun, and I was like, oh my god, what's going on here? You know, and I sent it off to Max and the other coaches, and she was really helpful and kind of broke it down for me, and she was like, basically he's playing, it's not great that he's playing with you, but that is play. And it's just not something I'd seen him do before in that context. So it was really reassuring to have somebody go, no, he doesn't, you know, he's not annoyed and he doesn't want to run you over. He's just playing with you. And, you know, that was nice to have that reassurance. And, you know, wherever you are on your journey, it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes to sort of give you a perspective that sometimes maybe you can't get because you're emotionally invested in that horse and your own training and your own sort of progression. So number 8 is watch lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of training videos. That would be one of my suggestions, because if you really learn to evaluate the emotions of other people's training in a kind of impartial way, and look at how the behaviours are being trained or how you think they may have been trained, you'll really start to hone your skills as a positive reinforcement trainer, and you can obviously apply that to your own videos. And I would say there's a lot of stuff online that is branded as positive reinforcement but isn't, and all is not as it seems. So my sort of top tips, if you like, would be look at the horse's ears. Does their face tell a different story to what their body is doing? You know, do they look happy? Have they got a relaxed expression? Are their ears forward or kind of floppy, or are they pinned back, you know, or frustrated? Is there any pressure being used alongside the food? You know, if it's force-free, why is there a head collar being used? Why is the horse being led with a rope? Things like that, you know, you just start to kind of be a little bit suspicious of, and kind of give away that maybe it isn't necessarily force-free training. Other things are, is there any alternate food available? Are there any other options being presented to the horse? Or is it, look at this amazing clicker training to get my horse onto a trailer, but I've got a head collar and lead rope on him and he's not allowed to go anywhere else? Do you know what I mean? Things like that. Start to ask questions about whether that is really positive reinforcement or not. So number 9, I've called why, and what I mean by why is ask yourself, why is this behaviour happening? And so often the answer will fall under pain, management problems, previous aversive experiences or handling. So, you know, obviously I'm a bit of a broken record when it comes to suggesting that people get their horse vet checked. All the horse charming coaches are, really, because until you know that you've eliminated pain as a source of the problem behaviour, you know, no amount of training is going to kind of help, really. And if it did, it would be masking the true issue, really, and it would come out in other ways, perhaps. Management is obvious. You know, if horses aren't getting enough forage, aren't getting enough turnout, aren't getting enough time with the same species, aren't getting enough enrichment, then issues do occur. And previous aversive handling, that's something that we can't necessarily avoid when we're transitioning, because we can't know what we didn't know. You know, I spent time feeling guilty for the things that I'd done to my horse, but actually all you can say is, well, I'm not doing those things now. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to take his views into account and make sure that he feels okay emotionally now. That's all any of us have, is what's happening here and now, really. But it is important to keep in mind the previous aversive experiences that the animals had, because you can't expect somebody to swim 10 miles out to shore and not swim 10 miles back. So just because we've turned over a new leaf, you can't expect your horse to just get on board with that and feel okay around you immediately. It's a process. So this one is the last one, and I've called this the scales of training. Obviously not the dressage scales of training. This is my Emma and Flynn scales of training. So what we've got here is, this is us in our aversive life. So you'll see here is Flynn, that's his side of the scales, and here is me. So what this demonstrates is my agenda, my wants, my needs were heavier in our life than his. So we were out of balance, basically. I wanted to ride, I wanted to compete, I wanted to hack out, I wanted to go to the beach, etc, etc, etc. And that meant that we were out of balance. This is our set of scales during the transition period. And what had to happen, this is just for us, it's not necessarily going to happen for you or for anybody else, this is just my experience and my interpretation, is that for a while Flynn's needs were much, much heavier than mine, and I actually felt the weight of that because I had to do a lot of changing in order to put his needs first. I had to stop touching him, I had to stop riding him, I had to stop grooming him, and I had to stop leading him. Anything that he may have found aversive, I had to stop doing. So for me, I was getting a lot of the hard work of having a horse and not really getting what I wanted back. And that's just in the transition period, that's how it felt for me. But what happened is when I put his needs first and his happiness started to increase, what we ended up with was this in our force-free life, where Flynn and I are now in balance and we actually want the same things out of life. So I want him to be happy. I don't care if I don't ride him. He is a really easy chap to be around, so that makes me happy. You know, I don't get nervous going out to feed him or lead him or do anything with him, because, you know, we're cool together. You know, we're absolutely all right. You know, and last summer my dad came round and he was watching me. I was just hanging out with Flynn on the yard while he looked after my daughter. And, you know, my dad's not horsey at all. And he commented and said, "Oh, Flynn really looks like he wants to be with you. He wants to be around you." And, you know, he does. That's so awesome, you know, because it was not like that. It was not like that at all. You know, I would come out, he would go as fast as he could in the other direction, you know, and I don't blame him. I really don't blame him. But I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I couldn't understand why it was the way it was, you know, until I started looking at this stuff and kind of really thinking about how I could change it, you know. So I don't like the word relationship or bond, you know. It's something that comes up a lot, you know. I want a better relationship, I want a better bond. For me, I just want my horse to see me as a safe presence or a safe person to be around. And I think, you know, we've achieved that. We are there, and I want to keep us there. You know, so that's all I've got to say, really. That's my kind of 10-step summary, if you like, of my transition to positive reinforcement. Thanks, bye.